My pranams to the Holy Trinity, my pranams to revered Ranganathanandaji Maharaj, and all the elders on the dais. It's indeed a great honor for all of us, and a fitting tribute to the memory of our most beloved Ranganathanandaji Maharaj that we have with us today, Padma Vibhushan, Dr.M.S. Swaminathan as the chief guest and the keynote speaker for the first memorial lecture for Swami Ranganathanandaji. They say in English, well begun is half done. If we are beginning like this, I can imagine in the next 20, 30, 50 or 100 years how wonderful these memorial lectures will be. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation. If we look at the aim of our chief guest's life, which of course I got from the internet just now, it says that he wants to get rid of world hunger and poverty. Swami Ranganathanandaji's love for the poor has been spoken about again and again. He would come from the European tour with a lot of foreign currency and immediately distribute it to all the people around. He would not keep a single rupee in his pocket. We have seen this ourselves. And here we have a living embodiment of Swami Ranganathanandaji's ideal in our keynote speaker today, who wants to get the world rid of hunger and poverty. As Revered Bodhanandaji said, sir, we couldn't have had a better speaker for today. He has been honored for all his great contribution to agriculture, first by Padma Shri in 1967, then by Padma Bhushan in 1972, Padma Vibhushan in 1989, and the World Food Prize in 1987. These are only a very small part of what can be said, because I don't think I would like to stand between the great lecture which is awaiting us and an introduction. But I would just like to mention a couple of points. His birth date, 7th August 1925, is a very mystic number. I'm sure if we add it up and if we see, I think he's destiny's child. And he gives us this topic. He says, science and shaping our agricultural destiny. Sir, you were born with this destiny. I think it is destiny working out today in this form. Shaping also is a very powerful word, because Ranganathanandaji's main aim was transformation. He transformed the entire spiritual culture of every city he went to, every city he lived in, especially here. And when you called in your lecture, one of the words you used is shaping our agricultural destiny. I'm sure the beautiful, serene smile on Ranganathanandaji's face is specially for you today. One more point which I think all of us must have noticed. We saw in the video, refreshing our memories, the great Swami Ranganathanandaji. We are seeing the speaker here. Can't you make out the difference? An intellectual glow shining on both their faces, a spiritual commitment which is linking them together. This is the worldwide web of ideas, of spirituality. Swamiji in his practical Vedanta, just now we heard in his incomparable voice saying that, there is divinity in each soul. Vivekananda's words. There is excellence, potential in everybody. The potential is actualized, concretized in our great speaker this evening. Thank you, sir. I now hand over the mic to Padma Vibhushan, Dr.M.S. Swaminathan.
Thank you very much, Professor Sumita Roy, for these very kind words. Respected revered Swamijis, Shri Ram Babu, Shri Nilpendra Rao, and other very distinguished members here, both belong to the MUT and the audience. I was very thrilled when I got the invitation on behalf of the Citizens Committee for the centenary celebration of Swami Ranganathan to give a lecture. Because as we already mentioned, I have been a follower of Swami Vivekananda, all his writings, because they give you a great deal of inspiration and guidance in your own day-to-day life. Swami Ranganathan used to listen to him in Delhi when he was the monk. He was very famous, his lectures were very famous. Some people like J. Krishnamurti was also like that. People used to go there to listen. Then of course, as was mentioned, he came to the Philippines. I think it was arranged by the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, Sri Ramakrishna ji. He persuaded him to come. And he gave a series of 3 lectures on science and religion, faith and religion, and so on. In the beginning, there was some apprehension, because the audience was like this. It is our auditorium of the International Rice Research Institute. But all of them were Roman Catholics, most of them were Roman Catholics. So how far Swami Ranganathan's message is going to go home. But the correct evidence of what his impact was, normally after the first lecture, the second lecture, first lecture people come out of curiosity. Second lecture they won't come. But all the 3 lectures, the hall was more full, and a tremendous standing ovation to him, because he had the great capacity to carry the message of Vedanta, of Bhagavad Gita, in a very simple way. And also science was his passion, science and religion, because his interpretation of science, I am grateful to Swami Buddhamayanati for printing. Only yesterday I had sent him, I was rather surprised that he already got it printed. Since a manuscript is in your hands, because I thought as a memorial lecture, I should put a record, that is why I sent him the manuscript. You can go through it when you have time. I'm going to take a few points from there and develop it in relation to today's. As was mentioned again, my association with the Ramakrishna institutions is an old one. When I became the Director General of the Indian Council of Agricultural Research in 1972, I started what I call the Krishi Vigyan Kendras, farm science centers, where the pedagogic methodology was learning by doing, not by lecturing, learning by doing, so that whether literate or illiterate, you can master the technology. I have seen tribal women in Orissa master the technology of induced breeding of fish, taking the pituitary glands, injecting them and so on. So what we call illiteracy doesn't come in the way of acquisition of skills. They can master the skills, provided your pedagogic methodology is learning by doing. So the first one, some of the early Krishi Vigyan Kendras, sir, you were there in Ranchi. Ranchi was one of the first one, Narayanpur was another one. Nempeet Ashram of Swami Vivekananda was also another one. In the Kakdeep in Sundarbans, doing very good work even now. In fact, these are some of the best Krishi Vigyan Kendras in the country. Those associated with the Ramakrishna Mata are the ones. Because all of them are interested in food, as was mentioned earlier. Swami Ranganathan, when he came to the International Rice Research Institute, I asked him, he was staying with me, I asked him, would you like to go around the rice field? He said, then I have not come to see the auditorium and the people, I have come to see the rice. So we went around the whole area, and he used to take quotations from appropriate one according to the audience. For example, mention was made about hunger. He used to quote the great Roman philosopher Seneca, who said the same thing, that is, a hungry person listens to neither to reason nor to religion, nor is bent by any prayer. A hungry person listens. So when he says this to the audience in Philippines, from the Roman days, it makes a great deal of impact. That was his great quality. Seeing the audience, the nature of the audience, you modulate your references to suit them. And one of the great things was his humanism, and he was a universal person, what we call Vasudeva Kudumbakam was to him part of his life. Everybody was part of his life. For example, I don't know how many of you have read his books, like The Christ We Adore. He's an exponent of Vedanta, of Upanishads, of Bhagavad Gita. But the book on The Christ We Adore, Bhagavan Buddha and our heritage. In other words, whichever may be the religion, he was able to see the quintessence of it, the best in it, and then try to translate it into words which are meaningful to a normal, like all of us, who might not have read a lot of spiritual books, but nevertheless he used to make them very understandable. His lectures, one of the lectures in International Rice Institute when I was there, many lectures of his kind was faith and religion. It's a very beautiful exponent. I've taken some quotations in the manuscript which has been printed, so I'm not going to go through them again. When you read it, you can read what exactly he said. But the faith and religion, for example, Charles Darwin, we had the 150th anniversary. This year we had the 150th anniversary of Rabindranath Tagore and so on. Charles Darwin's and the origin of life and this evolution of species through natural selection. It was a blasphemy in the Western world. It was a blasphemy because many of you have read Darwin. Famous cases, people said, you are telling us that we have come from monkey. This is not acceptable at all, the whole concept of creationism. But Swami Ramananda used to point out how in the ancient Indian thought, Dashavataram, for example, from the fish, we never thought evolution of human being from aquatic forms to those birds and then human beings and so on. That was part of our life. And also pointed out in the Indian thought, all life was sacred. Even so-called non-living material objects, if you come to, it must be in Andhra also, in Tamil Nadu, Ayuda Puja. On one day, everybody, including the doctor, most sophisticated doctor, worships his sword, knife, and what he uses, the instruments he uses. So whether it is animate or inanimate, the veneration of those who are helpful to you in your day-to-day life, that's a very important feature of the Hindu philosophy, which we have forgotten. I was talking about Charles Darwin's wife was Emma Darwin, or Emma Wedgwood. The Wedgwood is a very famous ceramic stuff, very expensive, very famous one. Emma Wedgwood was a very strong Catholic. They had 10 children and she didn't believe in one word of what her husband has written, Charles Darwin, the origin of life and the natural selection. But nevertheless, she edited the publication, and because she was a good editor, and somebody asked her, how do you put up with this man, where others are all saying that he's committing blasphemy, he's saying that we all arose from monkeys and so on. And she said, what leads to faith is feeling and not reasoning. Reason and feeling, both are important. In life, faith is also important, you don't run it down, but nevertheless, science is based, I've quoted there, as Ramananda's word, about a scientific discipline, scientific rigor. You really verifiable facts are important for science, and also the search for truth. The other thing which Ramananda was very keen is to convert pure science also into applied science. I have dealt with it in the written manuscript. You will find what he called science as lucifera, that is light, which sheds light. Science as fructifera, in other words, both are Latin terms, lucifera and fructifera, that gives fruits to the people. Whereas agricultural science, ultimately it should lead to better rice varieties or better sorghum or jowar varieties and so on. So how do you convert lucifera, light, into fruit? That's what a tree does. With the sunlight, it does convert it into sunlight, into fruit. Now, this is it's called nowadays this kind of thing, converting original research or basic research, as we call it, into applied applications, whether it is in medicine, whether it is in agriculture, whether it is in industry, or whether it is the environment management. This is now called translational research. Translational research involves converting basic science into applied science. In other words, lucifera into fructifera. So I suggest to the Swamijis here that in commemoration of the centenary, we should establish Sri Ranganathan Swami Center for translational research. How do you convert the two, the luciferin to fructiferin? And I shall be very happy to recommend to you. It was very appropriate because he was a transformational leader. As was mentioned, he transformed the attitude. In fact, the small piece which was shown here on crime should be shown in every college now today. This morning, whenever we get up, I am afraid of going through the newspapers. Either there are scams or there are murders, one or the other two. Today also some young student had murdered his teacher and so on. Very unfortunate. It is very unknown in our country in the past, becoming very common nowadays. Even the United States, young boys are shooting in campuses and so on. Something very wrong. What is the crime? The point which was made here. If you read many of the publications or writings of Swami Ranganathan, you will find he has very extensive quotation from Sir Arthur Eddington. These are all famous science exponents. And Erwin Schrödinger, what is life? Schrödinger was one of those very early, about 70 years ago, Nobel Prize laureate. He showed that it is only the Advaita philosophy, the non-dualism, Atma and Brahman, is the most scientifically compatible with modern genetics. In other words, it is called what is life. The ancient Hindu thought, enshrined in the Upanishads, is the most compatible with modern science. And so whether it is evolution, whether it is in terms of conversion of ideas into reality and so on. About faith, Swami Ranganathan said, there are a number of people who seem to acquiesce in the so-called popular faith. That is, popular faiths of various kinds. Their idea of belief may be better translated as non-thinking carelessness. Whenever you blindly, even faith should have some rules. If it is not there, it's a non-thinking carelessness, that's what he said. Well, we can go on talking about Swami Ranganathan to this audience. You are all here, you read these books, and you are living here, you are going to hear very many lectures. But we now take the second part of my talk. I want to pay my tribute to him because he is always, in fact, my 60th birthday, I have got a number of students in Hyderabad. They said, you celebrate your birthday here in Hyderabad, Osmania University. And Shankar Dayal Sharma was then the governor, he was kind enough to come. But my wife and I first came to the mutt here, took the blessings of Swami Ranganathan, and then only went to the function. So I have very fond memories of this particular place, the institutions of Ramakrishna mutts everywhere. And of course Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Swami Vivekananda and Swami Ranganathan and many of that order are really the jewels of our country. They have taken our philosophy far and wide. In a way people can assimilate them, and in a way which can practice them in day-to-day life. Because there is no use in having religion which you don't practice in your day-to-day life. It must become part of it, like just as we are eating our breakfast or lunch, it must become part of it. Religion must become part of our life. I am going to take challenges in shaping the future. The very word shaping the future, already mention was made. The reason is prediction people do. Doomsday predictions, there are very many. In fact, when I started my work in the 50s at Cuttack in the Rice Research Institute, there were a large number of very dire predictions about India. In fact, even people like Poland and Ehrlich is a population bomb. If you read population bomb, it says India's hopeless case. They all said they don't worry about India because they have to starve to death. They can't produce because every year we were increasing the import. What is called a PL480 wheat used to come. Other countries also gave a ship-to-mouth existence. That is how internationally India was known as a country which was leading a ship-to-mouth existence. But when I see so many young people here, let me tell you the more cheerful part of it. This year, most probably, the government of India, the parliament will enact a food security bill, which even in the very first year will commit over 60 million tons of homegrown food for the world's largest social protection scheme against hunger. When it is enacted, it will be the world's largest social protection scheme against hunger, all with homegrown food. I have seen the days when as I said, we were waiting for a ship to arrive in one of the ports before what is now called a PDS, public distribution system, can be fed. This is a historic transition brought about by our farmers. But shaping the future, and at that time also, we had a dream. We had a meeting on a book called Famine 1975 by Paul and William Paddock in the early 60s. And they also predicted Indians will die like sheep going to slaughterhouse. This is the word they used. Indians will die like sheep going to slaughterhouse, but out of hunger. And so we thought we must make this prediction not come true. We must see that these predictions are become untrue. By God's grace, everything worked out well between 1963 and 1968. Our farmers increased wheat production by an order which is greater than the previous 4,000 years. That is why it's called a revolution. The amount of wheat which was increased in 4 years' time was more than the previous 4,000 years, about 7 million tons from Mohenjo-daro time to 1947. And between 1964 and 68, another 7 million tons. In other words, that is the kind of transformation which was brought about. That is why it was called a revolution. Indira Gandhi released a special stamp called Wheat Revolution. But at the same time, when an American gentleman, William God, he coined the term Green Revolution because we all live as the guests of the green plants, because the green is the only one which can convert sunlight into food through photosynthesis, and the farmer. But at the same time, the Green Revolution means all plants, not only wheat. Indira Gandhi had a stamp called the Wheat Revolution, but the Green Revolution was rice, of jowar, of bajra, of maize, and so on, all crops where there is an increase in production through the productivity pathway. The only definition is increase in production through productivity pathway, not through area expansion. Because between 1947 and 1967-68, we did increase production. Total production, if you see the data, has gone up, but largely due to area expansion, also area under irrigation, both of them, not only total area under irrigation. Now, among the shaping the future, I'm going to take four challenges and deal with them. The first challenge is what we call demographic challenge, our population challenge. Now over 1.2 billion human beings and over 1 billion farm animals also. We have buffaloes, cows, sheep, goats, poultry. Poultry alone is about 500 million in our country. So when we plan for food security, we have to plan for nearly 150 crores of people by 2030, and over 1 billion farm animals. They also require food. Otherwise, your cow won't give you if you don't feed it and so on. So it's a very gigantic task. How are we going to do it? So the demographic challenge in our country is that two kinds of challenges. One is the young people, the younger generation. The other is the woman gender dimension, the age dimension and the gender dimension. Recently, must have said, most of the predictions show by 2020, India will be the youngest country in the world. The youngest country in the world in the sense, the highest proportion of young people in relation to older. Japan is the other end of the spectrum. Japanese are almost 80, over 80 now. They will be very oldest country. We are the youngest country. But then, are we reaping the demographic dividends? What are we getting from the young people? Are we giving them opportunities to give their best, always in terms of science, in terms of art, whatever it is, whatever vocation they take? The demographic challenge can come. How to attract and retain youth in farming? Wherever I now travel in the country, they say, the older generation whom I know, they say, no, our young people are not interested in farming. They are not willing. I said, why are you selling your land? First of all, land price is very high, very attractive. In Punjab, Haryana, that region, if you have 1 acre of land, you get 1 crore of rupees. If you put it in a bank and get even 8 or 9% interest, you have much more stable income than agriculture, because agriculture is a profession which is the most risky profession in the world. You may rains, you know very well in Andhra, there are a number of blocks which have been declared as drought stricken. But rains fail, nothing is under our control, under the farmer's control. There are pests and diseases and so on. We don't recognize when you go to dinner tonight how that food is produced, with what great difficulty farmers are producing that kind of food. So how do you attract and retain youth in farming? First of all, I think we should give more social prestige to farming. Otherwise, younger people won't come. Younger people think it requires only brawn and no brain. They think it's a physical work, there is no need, there's only labor and not of intellect. That's why Gandhiji said long ago, Indian agriculture will progress only if you marry intellect with labor. If brain and brawn, he told the educated people, don't leave the villages because they need you. They need your brain, even if not the brawn. So how do you make farming more intellectually stimulating and economically rewarding? Gandhiji, so first I said you must give greater social prestige to the farmers. Gandhiji went to the National Dairy Research Institute in Bangalore. Now it is headquarters in Karnal. At that time, in 1927, and he stayed there to study how the dairy industry in India can be developed. And he stayed apparently for 2 weeks or so in that institute. When he was going, the director gave a book, like they always do, visitor's book, said, please sign the visitor's book. And it is still there, preserved. M.K. Gandhi, occupation farmer, address Porbandar. That's what he wrote. He was a barrister in law. I'm talking about 1927. He was a London. If you and I were writing, we'll write MA, B, LLD, all kinds, even imaginary degrees will write. But he wrote only a farmer. After him, there is no. Lal Bahadur Shastri tried to give some prestige to farming by calling Jai Kisan, Jai Jawan. But gradually, if you look at the Padma Award and so on, you will not find any farmer at all there. Even by mistake, you won't find it. Because 70% of the people of the country, we just take it for granted. Food, we take it for granted. That's why you quoted we don't waste it. It's a very important, sacred one. I'm glad you said. So we must, how do you make farming intellectually stimulating and economically rewarding? That means there must be a technological upgradation of farming. There is also a need for a training in our institutions, agriculture universities. We had in the Farmers Commission, which I chaired, suggested they must reorient the syllabus in such a way that every scholar becomes an entrepreneur. We said the motto of the Agriculture University should be every scholar an entrepreneur, a farm entrepreneur. And if you look at the composition of, if you look at the latest economic survey of India, you will find the contribution of agriculture to GDP is going down and down. It is now less than 14%, 13%. But they have also pointed out most of the jobs are coming from the farm sector. If you look at the data, 75% of labor, both in urban and rural areas, are related to farming. In other words, the onus for employment is in the farm sector, the opportunity for income is in the non-farm sector. That's one of the reasons why we find in our country so much of poverty, so much of deprivation, so much of differences between the rich and the poor, because many of the poor people, either landless labor or small and marginal farmers who depend on the rain and the market. So if you look at three aspects of income, primary, secondary and tertiary sources of income, in our rural India, mostly it's primary, that means agriculture. When I say agriculture, crop husbandry, animal husbandry, fisheries, forestry, agroforestry and so on. If you look at the United States, for example, the primary sector will be giving jobs to about 2 to 3%, about 20% from the secondary sector, manufacturing sector. 70% will be in the tertiary sector, what is called the services sector. In our country also, in the urban India, 60%, like Hyderabad for example, 60% of the jobs in the city come from the services sector. Various kinds of services, whether it is small shops, whether it is a whole variety of services, people who bring you your food to the market, what they call dabba walas in Mumbai, all of them are services sector. So we have to now think in the rural area, how are we, because the 1 hectare, 1 acre will not give enough income for the young people to be persuaded to take to farming, unless you grow anthuriums or birds of paradise, very expensive, flowers and so on. But that how many people can do? If everybody produces, there will be no market also. If everybody produces flowers, there will be no market also. Therefore, we have to make agriculture more remunerative, and for that purpose, we have to find jobs both in the tertiary, primary, secondary and tertiary sector. The Chinese did exactly what I'm now telling you. When they started their agricultural reform, they were having very serious famines. In fact, the great China famine of the 50s, late 50s, according to Amartya Sen, nearly 30 million people died. In our Bengal famine, 3 million women and children and men died. But they had a very large, but was not known because there was not this kind of international media in those days. But Chinese, therefore, when Deng Xiaoping came, he started the agricultural revolution. They had two-pronged strategy. One is increasing on-farm productivity and profitability of smallholding. The other is increasing opportunities for non-farm income. They called it township village enterprises. If any of you had gone to China, you must have visited the township village enterprises. They are method. That is why they are so strong in manufacturing capacity today. They can flood the market with market. Anyone, whether it is jeans, whether it is whatever, silk product, Karnataka people are in difficulty because the silk, the Chinese silk, they have developed enormous manufacturing capacity through the township village enterprise. It was part of their agricultural reform, mind you. It is not industrial reform. They started with the reform in rural areas, not in urban areas. They started with agriculture, the reform, and that is the wisdom of Deng Xiaoping. He knew, like India, China lives in its villages, and therefore how do you make villages more prosperous? I mentioned earlier that agriculture continues to be the primary employment providing sector. In the services sector, out of 1,000 persons, 147 are in rural areas, 582, nearly 60% of the employment in urban areas come from the 60%. So we need to see how we can increase the opportunities for services in the villages. For this purpose, some years ago I had suggested, when Mr. Vishwan Sinha was the Minister for Finance, providing structured opportunities to young people through agri-clinics and agri-business centers. Agri-clinic in the production side, agri-business in the post-harvest side. So that my idea was 3 or 4 one home science graduate, because they are very well versed in nutrition. One of our problems is extensive malnutrition. Then you have one veterinary graduate, because again, our farming is a mixed farming, crop and livestock. We don't have separate large animal farm, except in poultry. Otherwise, mixed farming. Then we have a large number of cropping systems and so on. So how do you really bring all these people to a services sector? And this is why they combine the agri-clinic and agri-business center. I would like to call them now, because they have not worked in the way it was originally conceived. They are administered by NABARD and an institution here managed. They are doing their best, but they have not been able to attract the young people to the extent originally envisaged. The educated young, I am talking about the educated, those who have gone out to the agriculture universities and so on. Because self-employment, many of the young people think they are much more comfortable with the structured employment, because you go to organized employment, whether it's a bank or somebody else. So now we have to think of, in my text I have given you some ideas, what kind of opportunities there are for the services sector, and what I have now called an agricultural transformation center, which combines agri-clinic and agribusiness. How do you transform the agriculture rural India with major emphasis on the income of the farmers, income orientation. If you read the National Policy for Farmers, it says we must bring about a paradigm shift from purely a million-ton wheat, million-ton rice orientation to measuring agricultural progress, to one of measuring agricultural progress through the net income of the farmers. Just as your DNS allowance and so on are adjusted periodically according to the cost of living, farmers also should have. The second major group of challenge, so demographic challenge, let me summarize by saying, a country predominantly of the youth, the one which will be the youngest nation in the world by 2020, it is important for us to attract and retain youth in farming. That cannot be done by lecturing. They require decent income, they want to send their children to colleges and so on. Therefore, agriculture becomes more remunerative. That means agriculture must be one whole modernized. Some degree of farm equipment is important. because the drudgery has to be removed, and at the same time, some degree of relevant mechanization has to be done. Number of things have to be done. The other aspect of demography is Mahila Kisan. One is Yuva Kisan, the other is the women's empowerment. Is equally important. The gender dimension, there's increasing feminization of agriculture, largely because the men are out migrating to get some jobs. If you read articles like Mr. Swaminathan, he will show you how many people, the buses in many times are full of men going to towns and cities looking for jobs, some additional income to supplement their farm income. So women, if you go to Uttarakhand, and mostly women are in charge of farming, but unfortunately many of them do not have patta to land or the land title. With the result, they don't get credit. The Kisan credit card, several crores have been distributed, but hardly, maybe 1% of women, although women, more than 50% of the jobs on the house is done women. So I had developed a private member's bill for introducing in Parliament. You will find details of it in the written text, in the printed text, the Mahila Kisan Sashaktikaran Pariyojana, or the Women's Farmers Entitlement Bill, entitling them to land, water, technology, and market particularly important. Access to technology, access to credit, access to land, access to water resources, and so on. Our second major group of challenges are in the field of ecology, or environment. In fact, this has been one of the criticisms against the Green Revolution, that Green Revolution did not look into the environmental aspect, pesticides, excess use of fertilizers, excessive exploitation of the groundwater, salinization of the soil, degradation of the soil, a whole series of problems which you know very well. In fact, in Hyderabad, in Andhra, there is much greater, the Deccan Society, they have all been showing how we can control pests without use of pesticide. One of the early warning came from Rachel Carson, called The Silent Spring. If your children have not read it, they should read it. It's a very good book, The Silent Spring, which showed how in the United States, excess use of pesticides and fertilizers caused the eutrophication of lakes and the death of the fish and so on. So we need the ecological challenge, and this year you will hear a lot about it, largely because this is the 20th anniversary of the Rio Conference, what was called the Earth Summit, 1992, the International Conference on Environmental Development was held at Rio de Janeiro. In 1972, it's also the 40th anniversary of the Stockholm Conference on the Human Environment. I have given a quotation there, a beautiful quotation from Indira Gandhi's speech, where she said, you all talked about environment, but the environment also consists not only of the fauna and the flora, the panda and the penguin. The panda is the, but also the very poor people deprived. Unless you also consider, when we say biology, it includes human beings also. You and I are also part of the biological world, living world. Don't neglect them, don't neglect them. Tigers are important. She herself, the whole Operation Tiger and Sundarban was initiated by her. But nevertheless, she was one of the earliest political leaders who pointed out the environment is a holistic one. It contains the fauna and the flora. It also contains human beings. And among human beings, there are a number of, just as the endangered species, there are also endangered human beings who are starving, who are neglected. So we need to, and what she also said, both unsustainable lifestyles and unacceptable poverty, both must disappear if you want to have a good environment. Unsustainable lifestyles. Even today, how many people are still not very sensitive to the need to have sustainable lifestyle. There are people who build 30 stories, 40 stories building, and even if you go to, I won't go to, you all know who they are, but even the taxi driver says, here is this man living in this with one child, one wife, 3 of them are occupying 40 floors and so on. So it is not part of our tradition to have flout your wealth, try to use it. Gandhiji said, you be trustee of your wealth. When Gandhiji was asked, why are you hobnobbing with Jamnalal Bajaj, Birla, you stay in Birla house, but you say you are working for Daridra Narayan, or you are working for the poor. And he said, no, I want my industrial friends to make money, but be honest, but not consider themselves the owners of that money, consider themselves as trustees of the money. What Jamshedji Tata said that Yamshiji Tata said, we must give back to society more than what we take out of them. That is a concept. Long before Carnegie, Rockefeller, and now Bill Gates and so on have come. This was the tradition set up long ago, that you serve as a trustee of your wealth and share it, either from the beginning, that from family itself, a joint family. Joint family was also sharing and caring within the family members. If one is not so well to do, you look after that person. In fact, I was a beneficiary of a joint family because my father died when I was very young. But my father's brother, they looked after, educated and so on. It was one of the blessings of a joint family. What we now see is more a green revolution. The green revolution, nothing wrong, green is the color of the chlorophyll. We won't be living here if we didn't have green plants. They are the only ones who can convert sunlight. Nothing wrong with the green revolution. But when a green revolution becomes a greed revolution, then you have a problem. More and more. That's what's happening in the country. In other words, excess use of pesticides, excess use of fertilizer and so on. That's why I coined another term called the evergreen revolution. In other words, I define evergreen revolution as increasing productivity in perpetuity without ecological harm. In other words, ecologically sensitive agriculture. It can be organic farming or it can be what we call green agriculture, integrated pest management, integrated nutrient supply. Also, I believe that in our country, you purely don't approach won't help. What I have called do ecology. Somebody said, you and I have called me the father of economic ecology. The reason why I have written a lot what I call do ecology. Do, even our children don't like, young child, if you go on saying don't do this, they get tired, they become very angry. But you say, no, don't do this, but do this way. Then they respond to the children, child also responds. Same thing, do ecology means how to do it right. Don't say always don't, supposing you don't like nuclear power, but at the same time we want power everywhere. So thousands of megawatts every day, it is increasing our demand. Then you have to say, how do you do? I've given one example. When I had a government position where I could do some influence the fate of the Silent Valley Reserve Forest in Kerala, one of the rainforests, very good rainforest, just for 200 megawatts of power, part of the rainforest was to be sacrificed. We are all protested, and I was Secretary of Agriculture, Forestry with us. I went there and gave a report to the government that this should be stopped. But my report does not say, don't do this. I said, you want 200 megawatts, this is how to get it. You want 20,000 jobs, how do you get it? In other words, I have given it the text in the printed manuscript so you can go through it. It's very important, particularly young people here, just to say don't do agitation. But then you say don't do this way, but do it that way. That's what we call do ecology. Don't ecology is all right in very rich nations because they have already very high standard of life. They have to protect that standard of life. We have no standard of life for 50% of the people, and therefore our problem is very different from an industrialized nation. So we require an ecology which is do ecology. There it may be purely don't ecology is all right. Don't do that and so on. So the ecological challenge is a very important one. We must look after. This morning, an award was given to a community from in Delhi. It is called the National Water Week. Today's National Water Day. The Prime Minister was there. The award was given to a Tolla watershed, Koraput. The Koraput, the tribals are today in the newspaper for some other purpose. They are kidnapping and so on. But they are wonderful people. They are wonderful people. The way in which they have developed the Tolla watershed into a bio-industrial watershed. A bio-industrial watershed means a number of small-scale industries along the watershed, so that you have farm and non-farm income, both of them, so that more income comes them. The same group of the Koraput tribals were also declared early this year, came to the Prime Minister, but on behalf of the Food and Agriculture Organization, as a globally important agricultural heritage site, because they have preserved over 3,000 varieties of rice and so on. These tribes, the great wisdom, traditional wisdom and knowledge. So we need to imitate, get the best out of the traditional wisdom, social wisdom, and marry it with modern science if you want to do sustainable development. The land care, water care, if you want to sustainable agriculture, both economically sustainable and ecological sustainable. I call it a Panchasheel. You have to have 5 major principles, 5 principles for sustainable farming. The Panchasheel for sustainable farming includes, first of all, you have land, water, and gene care. That is biodiversity, the care of the genes, the care of the land, care of water. Secondly, technology and inputs needed. I was listening to Dr. Mohan Kanda, somebody told me that seeds are not available. You have a number of varieties are available, but what are the use to the farmer if the seeds is not available? So technology alone is no use unless supported by the inputs which are needed to apply the technology. So technology and services. Then credit and insurance, both are very important. Credit is being increased in quantitative terms, but they don't reach the farmers, most of them. Credit and insurance is not there. Then fourth very important area which is neglected in the Panchasheel is the post-harvest technology and management. Post-harvest, in other words, the storage, the winnowing, the putting. I shudder to think I'll be going to the Punjab next week. Every year I go there at a time of when the wheat arrivals come, because it's a great joy. And some of the older farmers are still living, whom I agree. But you feel very happy when you see the arrivals. You feel very unhappy when you see how they are stored. You very contrast what they call ecstasy and agony. On one hand, ecstasy and achievements of farmers, agony in the way in which we are storing those grains and how we are treating them, those which are created very badly. So we have to have the fourth part of the Panchasheel is post-harvest technology. Today, there's a mismatch between production technology and post-harvest technology in almost all crops, including horticulture. We produce 250 million tons of fruits and vegetables, but the government itself says 30% are lost because the cold storage is not there, cold chain is not there. Therefore, the post-harvest, finally, assured and remunerative marketing. So starting with the 3 cares, the land, water, and the gene care, to technology and inputs, and of course credit and insurance, and post-harvest management, Finally, of course, assured and remunerative marketing. That is the key really. Today, most farmers are indebted largely because they take money from money lenders. Once you don't pay, you are out of it. You are out of the formal credit system. They have to take money, and many of the suicides and so on. So we need to launch a new agriculture movement based on integration of science and social wisdom, what I call the evergreen revolution. Mahila Kisans, you had seen, the globally important agricultural heritage site is a very important concept. It is like World Heritage Site by the UNESCO. FAO has started a similar one, but there are only 2 areas recognized in our country. One is the tribal communities of Koraput, the Koraput district area. The other is Kuttanad, both of them are K. Kuttanad in Kerala, the Vemanad Lake area, one of the most beautiful parts of our country. There, farmers 150 years ago started growing rice below sea level, several meters below sea level. They developed a technology for growing rice below sea level 150 years ago. Today, one of the consequences of climate change will be sea level rise. It is going to be very important. Therefore, in fact, they have recognized, FAO recognized this ingenuity of the farmers to grow rice below sea level long before. Well, the Dutch were doing it. Dutch have very sophisticated methods of bunds and so on. Ours is called bio-bund. They developed very simple methods of bunds by the farmers here. So we need to take advantage. The climate change is no longer a theoretical possibility. In fact, in the environmental problem, that is going to be the mega calamity. It is the tropical countries, tropical latitudes which will suffer more. Temperate latitudes will gain. If you are Siberian, if you are living in Siberia, or if you are living in Saskatchewan in Canada, you will be happy if the mean temperature goes up by 1 or 2 degrees. You will be very happy. When they see the sun, the way in which they dance, you have to see how the Swedes and Finland and so on, how they worship the sun. So climate change requires a considerable degree of anticipatory research, anticipatory action, and we must develop in every panchayat a woman and male member as climate risk managers. How to manage drought, how to manage flood, how to manage higher temperature. There are checkmating, what we call scientific checkmating of every one of the climatic calamities can be done. Again, I won't take your time here, but there is if there's a problem, there's a solution. I would appeal to my young people, don't think only of the problem, think how it can be solved. When we started taking the modern ICT, information communication technology to the villages, mainly in Puducherry, Pondicherry, now it's called Puducherry, Pondicherry. In the early 90s, about 20 years ago, I was very disheartened when somebody there, a very knowledgeable man, said, "Why are you wasting your time here? There is no electricity, proper electricity." Then he said, "The telephone doesn't work. There is no telephone. But we don't have that at that time, all our mobile telephony and so on." And he said, "The rats will come and cut off." And so I noted down whatever he said seriously. So all right, this is the problem. The rat problem, what do you do? The power problem, what do you do? It's the telephone problem, what we do? Every one of them, we got solar power for the power. Later on, Motorola came in the late 90s. The wireless technology. So wired and wireless, and the farmers themselves looked after the rats, so there was no problem. So don't be disheartened by a catalogue of difficulties. I think what is important is the opportunities. That's what Swami Ranganathan always say. Look at the opportunities which you have in life. So climate management is one very important part. Finally, before I've got the economic challenge and ethical challenge. I've talked about demographic challenge and then ecological challenge. The economic challenge is well known to you, the cost, risk and benefit structure. This is one of the great challenges. If farm economics and farm ecology go wrong, nothing else will go right in agriculture. Farm ecology and farm economics, both are going wrong, unfortunately. For farm economics, because today the input costs are very high. So even though there are so-called subsidies, many of them don't reach the farmers themselves. They are siphoned out. Credit you can go on increasing, but a small percentage go to the farmer. Most of them are subsidies given to companies and so on. So there is the economic challenge. Farming has to be much more remunerative. Farming has to be much more efficient and so on. And that's the point which I said. The Panchashil for farming is one method of putting it integrated. Ethical challenge, the final challenge I want to deal with is the ethical challenge. The ethical challenge is becoming much more important today, with modern science giving enormous power in the hands of people. For example, when I was in Cambridge in 1952, at the same time Watson and Crick, those who are geneticists, or Watson and Crick are well-known DNA double helix model. They were also in another laboratory, Cavendish laboratory. I was the genetics laboratory. They were nearby. I didn't realize their finding is going to have such earth-shaking impact. But in 1953, they announced the double helix structure of DNA molecule. Since then, you will find 53 onwards, almost every other year, the Nobel Prize in Medicine Physiology goes to a geneticist, including Harvard Khorana, all of them, because the whole molecular understanding of life at the molecular level has opened up uncommon opportunities for us to create new genetic combination. There are problems. There are, when man becomes Brahma, then you have to temper your power with a lot of ethical consideration. The ethics of it is important. Questions like stem cell production. United States, Mr. Bush had banned stem cell research because it's one method of creating another human being, human cloning. But therapeutic cloning is now accepted. By reproductive cloning, obviously you don't want to create one more person of your own kind. So ethical issues of various kinds are coming, and we must develop methods in each laboratory and each society its own. Whether it is genetically modified organism, there are stem cells, or the nuclear power plant. Today, people are afraid of a nuclear power plant after Fukushima, like what happened in Kudamkulam and other places. Although it's a clean power in the sense, it's a power which environmentally benign, doesn't create greenhouse gases, it can be done. There are, every one of them may have some risk. One must develop methodology by which there is consultation between the people and the scientists. I've been asking for a long time, whether it is genetic modification, whether it is nuclear power, or whether it is issues relating to climate scenarios and so on, global warming. There must be much more interaction between the public, some kind of consultative council. There's also need for more science media resource centers. Media is now today grown in our country enormously, and the electronic media is very powerful. The new media is also getting powerful. It is important they have authentic information, media resource center. One area of ethics which is important is equity in access to food. This year the Rio conference, Rio Plus 20, has its theme, green economy with inclusive growth, with socially inclusive growth, not exclusion. The technologies can be exclusive because once patents are taken, only those who have money can have access to technology. How do you make a patented technology, which is of great import? Supposing you produce a new kind of vaccine against HIV, AIDS, or tuberculosis, or malaria, and so on. It must be available to those who need it more. And how do you make it available? Or leprosy. This is why the Swiss people developed a very interesting method, what they call a humanitarian trust. They created a humanitarian trust. It was a public-private partnership in which they used to buy off the patent. They buy off the patents and then make it available, the genes which are available. In this particular case, it's a gene for vitamin A content. Vitamin A content, which can, vitamin A deficiency causes blindness in children and so on. So we have very ethical problem. Ethical problems are increasing. Ethical problems also involve equity, equity in access, equity in gender dimension, equity in terms of technological dimension. Both are important. One example of the consequence of neglect of the gender dimension, I just want to briefly mention to you. Many years ago, in 1985, I think I had gone to North Korea. Not a criticism of North Korea, but a great leader, Kim Il-sung, was alive at that time. And they were on the threshold of a large famine. I was the head of the Rice Institute. They said, please, rice is an important crop. South Korea was doing very well, but North Korea was in difficulty. Even this year, they are in great difficulty. They are negotiating with the US for about 200,000 tons of rice. Then I said, why should this country, North and South Korea, more or less similar climate, similar, why is this country so deficient in food? The other fellows are having so much food, the South Korea. If you go to Pyongyang, beautiful city Pyongyang is one of the most beautiful cities. All everywhere, Kim Il-sung statues and so on, the great leader. Then I said, I want to go to the rice field. I will go to. When you go out of the city, there is only women are there in agriculture, because every able-bodied person over the age of 16 was in the army. Over 1 million people, army was there because they had a large army. So feminization of agriculture was complete there. On the other hand, the woman didn't have any access to any kind of implement, gender-sensitive implement and so on. So all that I could do is to organize what I call a traveling seminar for about 20 women farmers. They went to China, they went to India, saw some of the implements the governments gave them. In other words, the gender dimension of equity is exceedingly important. Let me conclude by 2 or 3 quotations. One is from, I have mentioned it also in the text. I was president of the Pugwash conferences on science and world affairs for a few years before the present president, Dhanapala. The Pugwash conferences were really owed its origin to what is called the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein. Because in the 1950s, there was a great deal of fear. The Cold War was intensifying. And if there's going to be another nuclear war, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki memories were very, very strong. Therefore, how do you get a nuclear peril-free world? So Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein had a famous, there lies before us, today is very important, there lies before us if we choose continued progress in happiness, knowledge and wisdom. Shall we instead choose death because we cannot forget our quarrels? We appeal as human beings to human beings. Remember your humanity and forget the rest. Remember your humanity and forget the rest. If you can do so, the way lies open to a new paradise. If you cannot, there lies before us the risk of universal death through warfare and so on. And the Russell-Einstein Manifesto was also one which Swami Ramanathan used to quote and also was very dear to him. Let me conclude by Swami Ramanathan's advice to scientists. Scientists should communicate only verified and verifiable truth. Verified and verifiable truth. Because science is a search for truth. From the ancient sages of the Upanishads, over 3,000 years ago, to Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna, truth is the authentic temper and language of Indian spirituality. Truth is the authentic temper and language of Indian spirituality. This should be the temper and approach of all physical science, either modern or ancient. It's a very important advice to how to link science and society in a more... So climate science today, after Durban, there was an article in Nature which said climate science and climate policy occupy parallel worlds. Science says something, the political leader does the opposite, because they don't want to reduce the emissions at all in the name of maintaining standards of life. So this is a beautiful word, climate science and climate policy occupy parallel worlds. And as I mentioned earlier, we have to now convert the green revolution spreading in our country to an evergreen revolution, which is environmentally and ethically sound. This is the best tribute we can pay to the life and work of Swami Ranganathan. Again, he has given me great inspiration in my works. I thank you, Swamiji, for giving me the book. Thank you all very much. Thank you all.
Sir, I have to take a very deep breath before I start doing something. That is how he has inspired with a wonderful expression, linking with the philosophy given to us by Swami Ranganathan Maharaj. He has referred to a very vital statement given by Gandhiji that India lives in villages. Unless you take care of that, the progress of India would not be sustainable. Wonderful, sir. It is really a privilege to have such a talk of high erudition with the practical application needed for the country's development today. We feel very heartfelt at your wonderful talk, sir. Now, before we proceed further, may I request our chief guest, Dr. Swaminathan Garu, to kindly present solemnly today to Mr. Prashant Mohan. I request Prashant Mohan to come over here and receive it. He is the son of S.V. Mohan, who has been a great associate of the Ramakrishna, but who is no more today. He has been supportive of every activity that is done by the Ramakrishna. C.S. Mohan, who is not here. In such occasions like this, he was very jubilant, offering money, offering service, everything C.S. Mohan has been doing. I request our esteemed chief guest to present copy of the. Now, sir, and many people who are present here have come to listen to you and also ask something from you so that they get clarified about their doubts. So, for a brief time, we have a small interaction. Only 2 questions. Right, who will raise it? Please raise your hand to ask the question. Please take the mic. Please, all of you, please sit down. Do not move. We have a. Give it.
Sir, what is your take on this genetically modified? I mean, it's a very controversial subject, but as an authority, I think you can give us a lot of information.
Our chief guest desires that first he would note down the questions and answer.
question. What is the future of agriculture in India, sir?
Repeat.
What is the future of agriculture in India?
The future of agriculture in India. Second, next question. You do the aim back.
Sir, in the food security bill, I heard that 90% of the people are going to get the food at subsidy rates. So, if we need a long-term development, do we go with the freebies still in the developing India? Then how long can we sustain, give the subsidies even in the food sector? And the second question is, in spite of knowing that the only free trading, permitting the free trade is the only solution, why is the government not permitting free trade? We import onions from Pakistan, but we do not want to export rice to Russia. So why is this situation? How can we solve the free trading problem?
You spoke about ecological challenge.
Wait. That will make it. No, stop.
So you spoke about ecological challenge to be met in the longer run. What do you think is a better course of option for us in agriculture in the future? Will it be a rain-based agriculture or the present trend where we are diverting our waters from the rivers and going into more of an irrigation mode of agriculture? Which one you would find will be sustainable in the longer run to meet our evergreen revolution concept?
Okay. That's it.
So, all very important questions. I shall try to briefly react to. First, related to genetically modified food. Genetically modified food. I think there are a lot of articles written about this now. As I said earlier, genetic modification is a technology which was developed which started with the Watson and Crick discovery of the double helix structure of honey. It can be applied not only in agriculture but also in industry and in medicine and in environment. Environment, for example, bioremediation, it is called. The very first patent for a living organism was given to one Dr. Anand Chakrabarti, who is an Indian scientist of NRI in the United States. He developed an organism which could gobble up oil spills as a result of, can't hear? Can you hear? Oh. He developed this very important organism which can gobble up oil spills. And the Supreme Court of the United States, there was a lot of argument whether living organisms can be patented. In other words, can you own life? It's an ethical question again. And so the Supreme Court said that you can patent organisms which are clearly man-made, not God-given. You can't patent anything in nature, but you show that you have developed it. That's what Anand Chakrabarti got, because there's no such organism in that which can gobble up the oil spill. At that time onwards, a whole series of large number of organisms in medicine, very large amount of work has been done. Today, Alzheimer's and Parkinson, many of these problems. Genetic medicine seems to offer a scope. But the area of which is controversial is food biotechnology. Food biotechnology, whether it's BT brinjal, whether it is BT maize or BT soybean. The United States, they eat all of them, most of it is all genetically modified. In other words, whether maize or canola or soybean, all of them are genetically modified. They seem to be comfortable with the regulatory authority. In our country, the regulatory authority, one, there's not enough confidence. Secondly, also many of these have been done by multinational companies. So that between technology and who owns the technology, these two are very important questions. There is, if you go by the American experience, where, as I said, 80% of the maize they eat is all genetically modified, all the soybean, all the mustard, all the canola, they are all soybean. You can introduce a gene, which you need for the purpose of a resistance, heat tolerance, salinity tolerance, all those. So what we should do more, if you want to take advantage, the technology itself is neither safe or bad or risky. Depends upon how you use it. Let's say with atomic power, you can make an atom bomb or you can generate energy. Many of the technologies depends on the use, on the base of ethical considerations, so on. So we must have more of public sector research in this area. Public sector research, and we must have a biotechnology regulatory authority which inspires public confidence, political confidence, professional confidence, and a whole media confidence. All of them. We don't yet have a regulatory authority. There is a government bill which is being developed. There is a lot of criticism about the bill. But I would say technologies will go on whether you like it or not. So long as the human brain works, people will discover new things. But how to ensure that technologies are not for self-destruction, but for life-saving technologies is important. Future of agriculture is our future. If agriculture has no future, we have no future. I would say because I mentioned earlier, and you will find also data. Still 70% of the people depend upon farming for their lives and livelihoods. That is source. So I call our agricultural future is our future, and we can't mortgage our future, and therefore we can't mortgage our agriculture. We must ensure that our farmers are not thrown to the wolves. They must be recognized. Gandhiji recognized him by calling himself a farmer, identifying himself with them. I think the whole mindset of the educated people, urban elite, must change towards farming, unless they consider farming also as an intellectually satisfying profession and a very ethical profession on the land. Because if farmers who are giving life to others, farming is a life-saving profession. If they have to take their own lives, then something seriously wrong with that society. Please reflect what I said. Farming is a life-giving profession. If farmers who are giving life to us, tonight we have to eat whatever they produce, the commodity. If they have to take their lives, then something very seriously wrong with that farming. So each one of us should have, not only political leaders, which is also important. The third is about how we can sustain 90% of the people on subsidies. It's not the food security bill. I personally believe that it should be a universal public distribution system with self-option. In other words, why should I go and take away the food at 1 rupee, 2 rupees, and so on? If you develop a food security system based on the culture of honesty, not the culture of dishonesty, the culture of honesty. Today, people suspect the ration cards are bogus, they are so on. If you develop in a predominantly young country, I would like to see more and more bills and acts and so on, provisions are based on a culture of honesty, then only people will become honest, unless you treat them honestly. If you really want to today subsidize food, maybe about 40 to 50% of people may need it at a moment, but the aim of the subsidy is always to end subsidy. In other words, if the person does not have the health and the nutrition for a productive and healthy life, whatever he may do, how can he be productive? In fact, the economic cost of hunger is exceedingly high, and that is why there is an obligation of the society to ensure that the first and most important requirement of human being, namely food, is available to everybody. This is what we call social protection. It's a joint family kind of concept which I explained earlier. And I think our government has gone on a historical step to make access to food is a right. But then, as I said, the present bill requires lots of changes, and I'm sure the parliamentary committee which is going into it, if you also have some suggestion, but you can't say that we should not spend money on providing food to those who are in need of food. I think it's because without it, the child, your female, you see, by a mother who is not enough nutrition, the child is low birth weight child, less than 2.5 kg. A low birth weight child has large number of disadvantages, including cognitive abilities in life. Therefore, it is a moral and ethical responsibility of society to ensure the first among the hierarchical needs of a human being, namely food, is available as a right, and that's what I hope we'll do. We also talked about import-export policy. Today, there's not enough coordination between various ministries. That's one of the problems today. Even food security, we have developed food security atlases. Many cases, not lack of calories, not even lack of proteins, but lack of drinking water, safe drinking water, sanitation. For example, in Tamil Nadu, one of the reasons for food insecurity is lack of toilet. 50% do not have a toilet. So there are non-food factors which influence. When we look at all our figures, which are alarming, 40% of people are underfed and so on. But most of them do not have the benefit of a holistic sanitation, healthcare, drinking water, primary healthcare, and all of them should come together. What we call a deliver as one. That's what is called nutrition security. Nutrition security is both micro and micronutrients, and also the non-food factors, especially drinking water. Drinking water is so important. Today, the rich people have insulated themselves with bottled water, but how many can? Large number of problems come from drinking water. So it's a complex issue, and I hope finally technological change, rain-based agriculture. So rainfall is not too bad in our country. If you look at the figures of rainfall, of course, monsoon may be aberrant, but on the whole, average rainfall is good. But what is important is to harvest the rainfall when it comes. Much greater than NREGA, for example, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program. His major aim is water harvesting, watershed management, aquifer recharge, and so on. But then they don't have the technical advice to do that properly. The panchayat don't have technical advice. I have been pleading that every district we must have a technical consortium, the IITs, the Agricultural University, or any other NGO who have got knowledge on watershed management, water harvesting. They should be able to help NREGA workers. Unless you marry intellect with labor, as Gandhiji said. Today labor is there, intellect is not being provided for them. Also, we all think that there are people, some beneficiaries of some program. The word beneficiary I don't like, because in government offices, even farmers are called beneficiaries. I said the only beneficiary in the country are those who are the benefit of the 6th pay commission. The others are not beneficiaries. They are the ones taking all the money of the people go to a small section of people. Therefore, they calling others as beneficiaries is very brutally insulting. It was against the concept of Swaminathan, where you consider every human being as equal. They are all citizens of our country. We must find a different word, beneficiary. As you can say, participants, fellow citizens, and so on. So the whole question of rainwater harvesting has to become a habit. In the northeast, for example, Cherrapunji, now called Sora. All of you might have read in your school books. I read also. Highest rainfall in the world. If you go in November, December, you won't get any water there, even drinking water. Now, as a result of what we call Jalkund harvesting water, there is water there. So save the water when you get the water. Use it very economically. These days is a habit of calling it more crop per drop of water and so on. Economically, there is also a big program called War for Water, not fight, winning, augmentation, and renovation and so on. There are a number of schemes, but they are very isolated. What is important? Harvesting water, utilizing it efficiently and economically must be everybody's business. And we must help projects like NREGA, which involve over 40,000 crore. We must give the best NREGA team an Environment Savior Award. We got very great difficulty for tribal women an award called Genome Savior Award, who are conserving germplasm, conserving biodiversity. It's called Genome Savior Award. I would like to see for the best NREGA team which has done a wonderful work in water harvesting, water management, watershed management, Environmental Savior Award. Like Gandhiji tried to give prestige to farming by calling himself farmers. We must now give prestige to work which is of national importance by recognizing the importance of the work, building up the self-esteem. Thank you very much. I have